I never expected a phone call to shatter the silence of our anniversary dinner. As I watched Mark anxiously check his vibrating phone, his entire demeanor changed. The warm glow of candlelight caught the gleam of satisfaction in his eyes as he excused himself from our table at the Lookout. I didn't need to ask who was calling. I already knew. What they didn't know was that tomorrow morning I would be announced as the new CEO of Horizon Tech Solutions, and Jessica Palmer, Mark's not-so-secret mistress, was about to learn what it meant to cross the wrong woman. If you've been captivated by this story of resilience and redemption, don't miss out on more. Subscribe now to join a community that celebrates strength, empowerment, and the power of standing up for yourself. We're just getting started. The evening had started like any other anniversary celebration should, with promises of romance and reminiscence. The Lookout's panoramic views of Seattle's skyline stretched before us, the Space Needle piercing through the early autumn fog like a sentinel watching over the city. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a deep burgundy dress that spoke of elegance and authority, paired with the pearl necklace Mark had given me on our first anniversary 5 years ago. Each pearl now felt like it was choking me with memories of lies. The waiter had just poured our wine, a vintage Cabernet that Mark insisted on ordering, the same wine we'd shared at our wedding. His attention to such details would have once made my heart flutter. Now it just made my stomach turn. I knew too much. The reservation confirmations I'd found, the late-night texts, the lipstick-stained receipts from hotels I'd never visited, they all led to Jessica Palmer, the ambitious project manager who had joined Horizon Tech 3 months ago. Mark raised his glass, the city lights dancing off the crystal. "To us," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "To 5 wonderful years." I clinked my glass against his, watching him take a long sip. The irony of his toast wasn't lost on me. 5 years of what he thought was a perfect cover for his indiscretions. 5 years of him thinking he had married someone who would always remain in his shadow. The phone call came just as our appetizers arrived, seared scallops arranged artfully on white porcelain plates. Mark's phone buzzed against the tablecloth, and I watched his face change as he glanced at the screen. "I need to take this," he said, already standing. "Work emergency." Another lie to add to his growing collection. I nodded, taking a deliberate sip of my wine as he walked toward the restaurant's entrance. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see him pacing, gesturing animatedly. Even from this distance, I could read his body language, the way he ran his hand through his hair, the slight smile playing on his lips. This wasn't a work call. This was Jessica, right on schedule. The timing was perfect, almost too perfect. Tomorrow morning, the board would announce my appointment as CEO of Horizon Tech Solutions. James Cooper, my mentor and the outgoing CEO, had kept the succession plan quiet, known only to the board and a select few. Jessica, despite her position, wasn't among them. She had no idea that her calls to Mark were being logged, that her every move within the company had been documented, that her attempts to undermine other employees had been noted. I reached for my clutch, pulling out my compact mirror. My reflection showed a woman transformed, not by anger or betrayal, but by certainty. The past 3 months had been a masterclass in patience. After discovering their affair, I could have confronted Mark immediately, could have given in to the rage that threatened to consume me. Instead, I chose a different path. I watched as Mark continued his conversation, his back turned to our table, to me, to the vows we'd made. In the reflection of the window, I could see his smile, the real one, the one he used to give me. My hand tightened around my wine glass as I remembered the day everything changed. It had been a Tuesday, unremarkable except for the email that accidentally popped up on our shared iPad. Jessica's name, followed by words that no wife should ever have to read. The way they laughed about their secret meetings, how they planned their rendezvous around my business trips, how they thought they were so clever, but they hadn't counted on me being cleverer. While Mark thought I was focused on our failing, Marriage. I was actually orchestrating the biggest career move of my life. Every late night at the office, every networking event, every strategic presentation had led to this moment. James had seen my potential long before I'd discovered Mark's betrayal. But the fire that discovery lit under me had turned me into an unstoppable force. The maitre d' approached our table, concern etched on his face. "Is everything all right with your meal, Mrs. Anderson?" I smiled, warmth not quite reaching my eyes. "Everything is perfect," I replied, knowing that tomorrow, those words would carry a very different weight. Tomorrow, Jessica would walk into her quarterly review meeting expecting to present her project. Updates. Instead, she would find herself face-to-face with her new CEO, the woman whose husband she'd been calling to gloat about their affair. Mark returned to the table, his cheeks flushed either from the cool Seattle air or the conversation, probably both. "Sorry about that," he said, straightening his tie. "You know how work can be." I did know about work. I knew far more than either he or Jessica realized. As I watched him settle back into his chair, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This wasn't rage anymore. This wasn't even revenge. This was justice, served on a silver platter with a side of career advancement. "Actually," I said, reaching for my wine glass, "why don't you tell me about work? I'd love to hear what's keeping you so busy these days." The bait was set, and I watched as Mark launched into another carefully constructed lie. Little did he know, every word was digging his grave deeper. The city lights continued to twinkle beyond the windows of the lookout, each one a star in my ascending universe. Tomorrow would bring its own revelations, its own chaos. But tonight, I would sit here, the perfect picture of a devoted wife, letting Mark believe he had the upper hand. After all, the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served from the CEO's chair. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or overlooked, subscribe now. Together, we're building a community that understands that sometimes the greatest victories come from being underestimated. Hit that subscribe button to never miss another story of triumph and transformation. The Lookout's elegant dining room buzzed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of fine china, but all I could focus on was the way Mark kept glancing at his phone. The device lay face down beside his plate, a silent reminder of the conversation I'd witnessed moments ago. Through the restaurant's sweeping windows, Seattle's skyline painted a glittering backdrop against the deepening twilight, each light a witness to the unfolding drama at our table. Our waiter, Michael, approached with practiced grace, his crisp black uniform a stark contrast against the warm amber lighting. "Are you ready to order your main course?" he asked, pen poised above his notepad. Mark barely looked up from his menu, his mind clearly elsewhere. "I'll have the Chilean sea bass," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here we were, celebrating our anniversary at the same restaurant where we'd had our first date 6 years ago. Back then, I'd been captivated by Mark's ambition, his charm, the way he spoke about building a future together. Now I could see through every carefully constructed facade. Mark ordered the filet mignon, rare, just like Jessica preferred, hers. Another detail I'd learned during my quiet investigation of their affair. The past 3 months had been an education in patience, each discovered text message and suspicious meeting, adding another piece to the puzzle of their betrayal. The space between us at the table felt like an ocean, filled with unspoken words and hidden truths. I watched as Mark swirled his wine, a nervous habit he'd developed recently. His platinum wedding band caught the light, and I remembered the day he'd slipped it onto my finger, promising forever. Forever, it seemed, had an expiration date. "The merger's keeping everyone busy," Mark said, breaking the silence. "Jessica's team is handling the transition." Her name rolled off his tongue too easily, too familiarly. "They're working late most nights." I took a measured sip of my wine, letting the rich notes of oak and cherry linger. "How fascinating," I replied, thinking of the real merger documents sitting in my private office at Horizon Tech. The ones that detailed my imminent rise to CEO, the restructuring that would put me directly in charge of Jessica's department. It must be challenging, managing such complex relationships, professional ones, of course. Mark's hand twitched slightly, but his poker face remained intact. He'd always been good at maintaining appearances. It was what had first attracted me to him in the corporate world, his ability to navigate complex social situations with ease. Now I recognized it for what it was: practiced deception. The ambient music shifted to a soft jazz number, and I was transported back to last week's board meeting. James Cooper, my mentor and soon-to-be former CEO, had smiled knowingly as he presented the succession plan. "Rachel has shown exceptional leadership," he'd said, his voice confident. "Her vision for Horizon Tech's future is exactly what we need." The board members had nodded in agreement, unaware of the personal stakes involved in their decision. My phone buzzed discreetly in my clutch, a message from Lisa, my best friend, and the only person who knew the full scope of my plan. "Everything's in place for tomorrow," she'd written. "Documents are ready. Meeting room booked. Jessica won't know what hit her." The waiter returned with our entrees, each plate a work of culinary art. Mark immediately began cutting into his steak, the red, juice spreading across the white porcelain like a metaphor for the bloodletting to come. I delicately flaked my sea bass, remembering the first time I'd discovered their deception. It had been a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind Seattle was famous for. I'd been working late at the office, preparing for my final presentation to the board, when an email notification had popped up on my desktop. A scheduling error had given me access to Jessica's calendar, and there it was. Every clandestine meeting, every working lunch, every late-night rendezvous with my husband, meticulously documented under the guise of project meetings. "How's your fish?" Mark asked, his attempt at normal conversation almost laughable in its inadequacy. "Perfect," I replied, letting a genuine smile cross my face. "Everything's absolutely perfect." And it was, though not in the way he imagined. Tomorrow, perfection would take on a new meaning as I watched Jessica's face when she realized who her new boss was. The restaurant sommelier approached with a bottle of champagne, another of Mark's anniversary surprises. As he poured the golden liquid into our flutes, I caught my reflection in the window, poised, composed, powerful. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same person who had married Mark 5 years ago. She was stronger, sharper, and far more dangerous. "To new beginnings," Mark proposed, raising his glass. He had no idea how prophetic those words were. I clinked my glass against his, watching the bubbles race to the surface. Each one seemed to carry a secret, a promise of what tomorrow would bring. The champagne was expensive. I recognized the label from the receipts I'd found in Mark's jacket pocket, the ones that showed he'd bought the same bottle for Jessica last month. Outside, a light rain began to fall, casting halos around the city lights. Seattle wore the rain like an evening gown, elegant and mysterious. From our table at the lookout, we could see the Horizon Tech building, its modern glass facade reflecting the stormy sky. Somewhere in that building, Jessica was probably still at her desk, feeling secure in her position, both professionally and in my husband's affections. The thought made me smile into my champagne. Tomorrow, that security would shatter like fine crystal dropped on marble floors. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, early enough to catch Jessica off guard, late enough for word of my appointment to have spread through the office. The timing was deliberate, just like everything else in my plan. Mark's phone buzzed again, and I watched his internal struggle play across his face. The desire to check it warring with the pretense of devotion to our anniversary dinner. "You can answer it," I said graciously. "It might be important." The same words I'd used countless times before, back when I was still playing the role of the understanding wife. He hesitated, then reached for the phone. I already knew what he would find. Another message from Jessica, carefully timed to interrupt our evening. She'd always had a talent for timing. I'd give her that. What she lacked was the ability to see the bigger picture, to understand that she was just a pawn in a much larger game. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of polite conversation and calculated silences. Mark spoke about work, careful to mention Jessica's name only in professional contexts. I listened, noting each lie, each careful omission, storing them away like ammunition for the battle to come. As we waited for dessert, I excused myself to the ladies' room, needing a moment to compose myself for the final act of this evening's performance. The bathroom was empty, its marble counters and mood lighting creating an atmosphere of luxury and intimacy. I checked my appearance in the mirror, adjusting my pearls, Mark's first anniversary gift, now a symbol of everything that had changed. Tomorrow, I would sit in the CEO's office, looking out over the same city that now sparkled before us. I would watch as Jessica walked into that review meeting, confident in her position, unaware that her world was about to turn upside down. And Mark? Mark would learn that the woman he had underestimated, the wife he had betrayed, had become the most powerful person in his mistress's professional life. The thought brought a smile to my face as I returned to our table, where Mark waited with 2 slices of chocolate torte, another echo of our wedding day. The chess pieces were all in position. Tomorrow would bring its own sweet revenge, but tonight, I would savor every moment of this carefully orchestrated dinner, watching my husband dig himself deeper with every lie, every glance at his phone, every thought of the woman who would soon learn the true meaning of professional hierarchy. The first warning signs flickered through my consciousness like distant lightning. Mark's dessert sat half-eaten before him, the rich chocolate torte barely touched as he checked his phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. The gentle clink of silverware against fine china from nearby tables felt oddly threatening, like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. A peculiar tension radiated from him, different from his usual distracted demeanor. His collar seemed too tight, his tie slightly askew. Small details that most would miss, but I had spent years learning to read his tells. The way his left hand tapped against the tablecloth, the slight furrow between his brows, the forced casualness of his posture. Everything screamed that something was off. The waiter approached with our coffee, the aroma of fresh espresso cutting through the heaviness of anticipation. I watched as Mark's eyes darted to his phone again, this time lingering longer than necessary. The screen illuminated his face for a brief moment, casting shadows that made him look older, more vulnerable. "Everything all right?" I asked, my voice carefully modulated to convey just the right amount of wifely concern. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken accusations. "Fine," he replied too quickly, sliding the phone face down beside his plate. "Just some last-minute project details with the team." Another lie to add to his growing collection. Through the restaurant's windows, Seattle's lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth, each one a witness to this unfolding drama. Of ferries, horns sounded in the distance, mournful and warning. The sound seemed to startle Mark, causing him to knock his spoon against his coffee cup with a sharp ping. My own instincts, honed by months of careful observation, were screaming now. Something was different about tonight. The usual pattern of his deception had shifted, taken on a new urgency. I could feel it in the air between us, thick with unspoken words and hidden agendas. The messages from Jessica weren't following their usual timing. Typically, she was more subtle, more calculated in her interruptions. Tonight, there was an almost frantic quality to their exchanges, as if they were orchestrating something beyond their usual clandestine communication. I took a deliberate sip of my coffee, using the moment to study him over the rim of the cup. His wedding ring caught the light as he reached for his water glass, and I noticed a slight tremor in his hand. Mark, who prided himself on his composure, was nervous. "The merger must be keeping everyone on their toes," I commented, laying the trap with practiced ease. "Especially Jessica's team. How are they handling the pressure?" His response was a fraction too slow, his smile a degree too fixed. "They're professionals. Jessica knows how to manage complex situations." Indeed, she did. Or at least she thought she did. What neither of them knew was that I had accessed their private communication channel at Horizon Tech 3 weeks ago. Their project meetings were documented in meticulous detail. Every rendezvous, every excuse, every careful alibi. The chandelier above our table cast prismatic patterns across the white tablecloth, creating a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. I watched as one particular pattern danced across Mark's face, highlighting the slight sheen of perspiration on his forehead. "More wine?" he offered, reaching for the bottle with forced casualness. His hand trembled slightly as he poured, causing a single drop of red to fall onto the pristine tablecloth. The stain spread slowly, like a secret bleeding into the open. My mind raced back to the email I had discovered earlier that day, the one that had confirmed my suspicions about tonight. Jessica had been planning something, coordinating with Mark in coded messages that spoke of project milestones and delivery dates. But they had grown careless, leaving digital breadcrumbs that led straight to their true intentions. The restaurant's ambient music shifted to a melancholic jazz piece, the saxophone's mournful notes perfectly underlining the tension at our table. A couple at a nearby table laughed, the sound jarring against the quiet intensity of our own interaction. Mark's phone buzzed again, this time with an urgency that seemed to vibrate through the entire table. He glanced at it, and I caught the brief flash of panic in his eyes before he could mask it. Something was definitely wrong with their carefully laid plans. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" he asked, already rising from his chair. "I need to make a quick call." I smiled, the expression feeling like a weapon. "Of course, darling. Take your time." As he walked away, I noticed his shoulders were too straight, his stride too measured. The walk of a man trying desperately to appear in control. Through the window, I could see him stop just outside the restaurant's entrance, his silhouette tense as he held the phone to his ear. The waiter appeared at my elbow, concerned by Mark's abrupt departure. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Anderson? Would you like me to wrap up the dessert?" "No need," I replied, my voice steady. "My husband will return shortly. He's just handling an urgent business matter." The irony of my words tasted bitter on my tongue. I used his absence to check my own phone, confirming what I already knew. Tomorrow's announcement was prepared, the press release drafted and approved. By 9 a.m., everyone at Horizon Tech would know about their new CEO. Jessica's quarterly review meeting was scheduled for 9:30, a meeting that would now take on an entirely different significance. Mark's return was marked by a subtle shift in his demeanor. The confidence that had carried him through dinner had cracked, revealing glimpses of something close to fear. He settled back into his chair with an uncharacteristic heaviness. "Everything, okay?" I asked again, watching as he reached for his wine glass with slightly unsteady hands. "Just some complications with the merger," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Nothing we can't handle." I let the silence stretch between us, knowing it would make him uncomfortable. The weight of unspoken truths pressed down on our anniversary. Dinner like a physical presence, turning each moment into a test of endurance. Outside, the Seattle rain had started again, painting the windows with elaborate patterns. Each droplet seemed to carry a reflection of our fractured marriage, distorting the city lights into abstract representations of truth and deception. The warning signs were no longer subtle flickers, but blazing signals. Something significant was about to happen, something beyond the carefully orchestrated reveal I had planned for tomorrow. Mark's increasing agitation, Jessica's unusually frequent messages, the underlying current of urgency, all pointed to a development I hadn't anticipated. But I had learned to be patient, to wait and watch as situations unfolded. Tomorrow would bring its own revelations, its own chances for justice. Tonight, I would observe every detail, every nuance of Mark's growing discomfort, storing each moment away as ammunition for the battles to come. The evening stretched ahead of us, each minute charged with the electricity of impending change. In the reflection of my wine glass, I caught a glimpse of my own expression, calm, composed, and utterly prepared for whatever storm was brewing on our anniversary horizon. Every time the restaurant door opened, letting in the cool Seattle air, I found myself transported back to the day I first met Mark Anderson. It wasn't at the Lookout, but at another upscale restaurant near Pioneer Square. Back then, he wore ambition like a perfectly tailored suit, and his smile held promises I was eager to believe. The corporate world had brought us together during a tech industry conference. I represented an up-and-coming software company, while Mark led marketing strategies for a rival firm. Our paths crossed during a panel discussion about digital transformation, where his insights caught my attention. But it was his charm during the networking session afterward that truly drew me in. Rain fell softly against the windows of the Lookout now, much like it had that first evening. We'd talked for hours over artisanal cocktails, discussing everything from market trends to our dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. Mark spoke with such conviction about integrity in business, about building something meaningful. The irony of those conversations wasn't lost on me now. Our courtship was a whirlwind of late-night strategy sessions that turned into dinner dates, weekend workshops that became romantic getaways. We spoke the same language of ambition and growth, understanding each other's drive in a way few others could. Within 6 months, we had mapped out not just our relationship but our combined career trajectories. James Cooper, then a rising executive at Horizon Tech, had been at our wedding. He'd given a toast about the power of partnerships, both in business and in life. I remembered catching his eye across the reception hall, seeing the approval in his expression. Even then, he'd recognized something in me that I hadn't fully embraced yet, a strength that went beyond mere ambition. The memory of our early days felt like flipping through a photo album where all the images had been subtly altered. The same scenes were there. Our first apartment together, the promotion celebrations, the quiet Sunday mornings planning our future. But now I could see the shadows lurking at the edges, the warning signs I'd chosen to ignore. Mark's hand brushed against his phone again, drawing me back to the present moment. The device seemed to hold a magnetic pull over him tonight, each message from Jessica acting like a compass needle pointing to his true north. I wondered if she occupied his thoughts during those early years, or if she was just the latest in a pattern I'd been too blind to see. Our waiter returned to clear the dessert plates, his movements precise and unobtrusive. "Would you care for another coffee, Mrs. Anderson?" The formality of my married name still rang true, even if the marriage itself had become nothing more than an elaborate facade. "Yes, please," I replied, noticing how Mark's attention drifted toward the entrance again. "And perhaps an espresso for my husband? He seems to be fighting fatigue." The subtle dig went unnoticed, lost in his preoccupation with whatever drama was unfolding on his phone. The first year of our marriage had been everything I'd dreamed of. We moved into a beautiful craftsman home in Queen Anne, spent weekends exploring the city's hidden gems, and pushed each other to reach new professional heights. Mark had supported my career moves with genuine enthusiasm, celebrating each promotion as if it were his own. Looking back, I could pinpoint the moment. Things began to shift. It wasn't when Jessica entered the picture. No, the cracks had formed long before she became his confidant. It started with small things. Missed dinner dates explained away by client meetings, weekend work sessions that couldn't be rescheduled, subtle comments about how my growing success might affect our dynamic. The chandelier light caught my wedding ring, sending prisms dancing across the tablecloth. I remembered Mark's proposal, how he'd orchestrated it during a business trip to San Francisco. He'd arranged for a private dinner at the top of the Mark, claiming it was to celebrate a major contract win. Instead, he'd gotten down on one knee, presenting not just a ring, but a vision of our future together. That future had seemed so clear. Then, two ambitious professionals building an empire together, supporting each other's dreams while creating something lasting. We'd talked about children, about balance, about maintaining our individual identities while growing together. All those conversations now felt like lines from a script, rehearsed but ultimately meaningless. Above us, the restaurant's speakers played a jazz version of our wedding song. If Mark noticed, he gave no indication. His world had narrowed to the space between our table and his phone, each notification drawing him further away from the anniversary celebration he'd insisted on having. The waiter returned with our coffees, the rich aroma a stark contrast to the bitterness of my thoughts. I stirred a single sugar into mine, remembering how Mark used to tease me about my sweet tooth. Those playful moments had disappeared gradually, replaced by distracted nods and perfunctory responses. Our shared calendar, once filled with date nights and weekend getaways, had become a battlefield of competing commitments and last-minute cancellations. The dreams we'd built together crumbled so slowly that I barely noticed until the foundation had completely eroded. Yet through it all, I'd continued to rise within Horizon Tech. Each challenge in my personal life seemed to fuel my professional drive. James had noticed, taking me under his wing, offering opportunities that pushed me beyond my comfort zone. While Mark's attention wandered, I'd focused on building something he couldn't touch, couldn't taint with his deception. The city lights beyond the window blurred slightly as I allowed myself a moment of genuine emotion. Not for the marriage I was losing. That had been gone long before Jessica. But for the woman I used to be. The one who believed in partnership, in shared dreams, in the power of building something together. Thunder rumbled in the distance, nature's percussion accompanying the jazz melody that filled the restaurant. The sound seemed to startle Mark from his phone-induced trance. He looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time in what felt like hours. For a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with. Ambitious, charismatic, full of promise. Then his phone buzzed again, and the illusion shattered. Our love story had begun in the corporate world, built on a foundation of shared ambition and mutual respect. Tomorrow, in the same professional arena where we'd first connected, that story would reach its climax. But tonight, surrounded by the ghosts of our past happiness, I allowed myself to remember the journey that had brought us here. Not with regret, but with clarity. The rain continued to fall, each drop a reminder of tears I'd refused to shed. Seattle's skyline stood witness to our unraveling, just as it had witnessed our beginning. Tomorrow would bring its own storms. But for now, I sat in the eye of the yaw, hurricane, watching the man I'd married drift further into the orbit of a woman who had no idea what was coming. The discovery hit like a thunderbolt on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The Seattle rain drummed steadily against my office window at Horizon Tech as I reviewed quarterly reports. A notification flashed across my screen, an incorrectly routed email that would change everything. My breath caught as I read the exchange between Mark and Jessica. Their words were carefully coded in business terminology, but the undertones were unmistakable. Project deadlines became dinner dates. Strategy sessions transformed into hotel meetings. Each message dripped with an intimacy that felt like acid on my skin. The modern glass walls of my office suddenly felt like they were closing in. I found myself staring at the sleek Horizon Tech logo emblazoned on the wall, its blue and silver, design a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside me. The very building where I had built my career now housed my husband's betrayal. My hands trembled as I dug deeper into the email thread. Jessica's responses were bold, almost taunting. She spoke of their special meetings with a confidence that suggested this wasn't new. How long had this been going on? The timestamps on their exchanges stretched back months, each one a dagger in what I had thought was a solid marriage. The rain intensified outside, matching my darkening mood. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Space Needle piercing the gray clouds, standing tall and unwavering. Everything I needed to be in this moment. I took a deep breath, forcing my racing heart to slow. Lisa's knock on my office door startled me back to reality. My best friend's expression shifted from cheerful to concerned as she read my face. "Rachel, what's wrong?" She closed the door behind her, creating a bubble of privacy in the fishbowl environment of our executive floor. I turned my monitor toward her wordlessly. Lisa's sharp intake of breath told me she understood the magnitude of what she was reading. Her hand found my shoulder, squeezing gently. "Oh, honey," she whispered, but offered no empty platitudes. This was why I loved her. She understood that some betrayals went beyond comfort. 3 months, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. They've been meeting at the Athenian Hotel every Thursday, planning their rendezvous during my business trips, laughing about. My voice finally cracked, but I refused to let the tears fall. A movement outside my office caught my attention. Jessica Palmer walked past, her designer heels clicking confidently on the polished floors. She smiled and waved, the perfect picture of professional courtesy. My stomach churned at her audacity, at how easily she could play this role while destroying my marriage. Lisa's grip on my shoulder tightened. "What are you going to do?" she asked, knowing me well enough to know that falling apart wasn't an option. The question crystallized something inside me. I turned back to my computer, pulling up another email, one I'd received just yesterday from James Cooper. The succession plan for his CEO position was already in motion. The board had made their decision. They were just waiting for the right moment to announce it. "I'm going to take everything," I said, a calm certainty replacing the initial shock. Not just the CEO position, not just the company, everything. The path forward materialized with stunning clarity. Every late night I'd worked, every project I'd led, every connection I'd built, they had all prepared me for this moment. While Mark and Jessica thought they were being clever with their secret affair, they'd overlooked the most important detail, my own rise to power. I pulled up my calendar, noting the quarterly review meeting scheduled for next week. Jessica's team was slated for a presentation she would now give to her new CEO. The irony would have been amusing if it wasn't so painful. "You're sure about this?" Lisa asked, though her tone suggested she already knew my answer. I nodded, closing the incriminating emails and straightening in my chair. They think I'm just the dutiful wife, too focused on my own career to notice what's happening. Let them keep thinking that. Let them get comfortable in their deception. The afternoon light filtered through the rain-streaked windows, casting shadowy patterns across my desk. Each shadow seemed to represent a different piece of my shattered trust. But instead of breaking me, they were forging something stronger. I reached for my phone, typing out a message to Mark about our upcoming anniversary dinner. My suggestion of the lookout was calculated. It was where Jessica and Mark often met, thinking their business dinners wouldn't raise suspicion. Let them have their inside joke. Soon enough, the joke would be on them. Lisa watched me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "You're scary when you're strategic, you know that?" A small smile crossed my face, the first genuine one since opening that fateful email. I learned from the best. James didn't mentor me all these years for nothing. The pieces were falling into place. The board announcement would come the morning of our anniversary dinner. By then, I would have gathered everything I needed. Every email, every receipt, every piece of evidence that proved their betrayal. But more importantly, I would have what they never expected: absolute power over their professional lives. I stood up, walking to the window to watch the rain paint patterns on the glass. Seattle spread out before me, a landscape of opportunity and revenge. In the reflection, I could see myself transformed, no longer the trusting wife, but a woman who understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't swift or violent, but patient and calculated. The office hummed with routine activity around me. Employees hurried past my door, unaware of the drama unfolding in their midst. Jessica's laughter echoed from somewhere down the hall, the sound grating against my nerves. Soon enough, that laughter would turn to something else entirely. My computer pinged with another email, the final confirmation from James about the succession announcement. Everything was ready. All I had to do was wait, watch, and let them dig their own graves with every secret meeting, every hidden message, every moment they thought they were getting away with their deception. The rain finally began to ease, patches of late afternoon sun breaking through the clouds. It felt like an omen, a sign that the storm inside me was transforming into something more powerful. I turned back to my desk, ready to begin the careful work of preparing for next week's revelation. "Lisa," I said, my voice carrying a new authority, "I need you to help me set something up." My friend nodded, understanding in her eyes. She knew, as I did, that what was coming wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, power, and the satisfaction of watching those who underestimated me realize their fatal mistake. The preparation phase began with precision, each move calculated like pieces on a chessboard. My office at Horizon Tech became my war room, every detail of Mark and Jessica's betrayal carefully documented and filed away. The Seattle rain provided a constant backdrop to my planning, its steady rhythm matching the methodical pace of my revenge. James Cooper's guidance had taught me the importance of timing in business. "Success," he often said, "is about seeing 10 moves ahead while your competition is focused on their next step." I applied this wisdom to my current situation, mapping out every possible scenario, every potential reaction. Lisa proved invaluable. During these preparations, her legal background helping me navigate the complex intersection of personal and professional boundaries. We spent late nights in my office, reviewing company policies, documenting every instance where Jessica had misused corporate resources for her affair with Mark. The evidence mounted steadily. Credit card statements showed lunch meetings that stretched for hours. Security logs revealed after-hours access to the building when I had been away on business trips. Email timestamps painted a picture of ongoing deception, each piece adding to the larger mosaic of their betrayal. I dedicated myself to understanding every aspect of Jessica's role at Horizon Tech. Her project files, team dynamics, client relationships, nothing escaped my scrutiny. Knowledge was power, and I intended to be thoroughly armed for our inevitable confrontation. The succession plan remained our closest guarded secret. James orchestrated the final details with the board while I prepared for my new role. Each meeting, each document signed, brought me closer to the position that would give me the ultimate advantage. The irony that Jessica's quarterly review would coincide with my first day as CEO felt like cosmic justice. My home office became a secondary command center. Late at night, after Mark had gone to bed, I would sit there reviewing security footage from the office, watching their subtle interactions in the hallways, their careful maintenance of professional distance that now seemed so obviously forced. The anniversary dinner reservation at the Lookout was confirmed weeks in advance. I chose the table carefully, one with a clear view of the city, where the lighting would be perfect for what was to come. The restaurant's manager, an old friend, ensured everything would be arranged exactly as I specified. Lisa helped me select my outfit for the evening, a deep burgundy dress that spoke of power and confidence. "You're not dressing for him anymore," she reminded me as I tried it on. "You're dressing for yourself, for what you're about to become." Each day brought new preparations. I arranged for key documents to be ready for the morning announcement. The press release was crafted with careful attention to detail, emphasizing my qualifications while subtly highlighting my oversight of all departments, including Jessica's. The quarterly review materials required special attention. I spent hours reviewing her team's presentations, noting discrepancies, finding weak points that could be exploited. Every project timeline, every budget allocation, every decision she had made would be scrutinized under my new authority. My private investigator delivered the final piece of evidence 3 days before the anniversary dinner: photographs of their meetings at the Athenian Hotel, timestamps matching perfectly with the calendar entries I had discovered. The images went into a secure folder, ready to be used if necessary. The psychological preparation was perhaps the most challenging. I practiced maintaining composure, schooling my features into a mask of pleasant ignorance. In meetings where both Mark and Jessica were present, I perfected the art of appearing completely unaware while cataloging their every interaction. James noticed my transformation during our transition meetings. "You've grown stronger," he observed one afternoon, watching me review acquisition strategies. "Whatever's driving you, it's turned you into exactly what this company needs." If only he knew the full extent of what was driving me. I arranged for my personal items to be moved into the CEO's office after hours, ensuring everything would be in place for the morning announcement. The view from that office encompassed the entire city, a perfect vantage point from which to watch my plans unfold. The technical details required attention too. I worked with IT to ensure my access to all company systems would be immediate and complete. Every email, every file, every communication would be at my fingertips. Knowledge was currency, and I intended to be wealthy. My calendar for the day after the announcement was strategically planned. The quarterly review meeting with Jessica's team was scheduled for maximum impact, late enough for the news of my appointment to have spread, early enough to catch her off guard. The conference room was booked, the attendee list carefully curated. Even my morning routine for the big day was plotted out. The car service was arranged, my outfit pressed, my presentation materials prepared. Nothing would be left to chance. I would arrive at the office early, before the announcement, ready to step into my new role with absolute authority. Each night, as I lay awake beside Mark, I refined the scenarios in my mind. I anticipated his reactions, prepared responses for every possible situation. The weight of my knowledge, of my impending power, became almost tangible in those quiet hours. The final days of preparation brought a strange calm. Everything was in place: the documents, the evidence, the timing. I moved through my regular routine with the serenity of someone who knows exactly what's coming, while those around me remained blissfully unaware of the approaching storm. Lisa checked in regularly, helping me maintain my focus. "Remember," she said during our last meeting before the anniversary dinner, "you're not just preparing for revenge, you're preparing to take your rightful place. Everything else is just collateral damage." She was right, of course. This wasn't just about exposing their affair or getting revenge. It was about claiming the power that had always been within, my reach, about becoming the person I was meant to be. The fact that it would devastate their carefully constructed world of lies was simply a bonus. The final piece fell into place the morning before our anniversary. The board's unanimous vote was confirmed, the last signatures secured. There would be no last-minute surprises, no unexpected complications. Everything was ready. All that remained was to wait for the perfect moment to spring the trap. The plan began to unfold with the precision of a perfectly tuned symphony. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the lookout's windows as I watched Mark fidget with his phone, each buzz drawing him deeper into Jessica's web of messages. Everything was proceeding exactly as I had orchestrated. My fingers traced the stem of my wine glass as I observed Mark's growing discomfort. The waiter had just cleared our appetizer plates, and the tension at our table was becoming palpable. Through the window, I could see the Horizon Tech building standing tall against the Seattle skyline, its windows reflecting the golden hour light. Lisa's text arrived right on schedule. Everything set for tomorrow. Legal documents in place, security briefed, board members all confirmed for the morning announcement. I allowed myself a small smile, quickly hidden behind my wine glass. Mark noticed nothing, too engrossed in his own phone screen. The timing had to be perfect. Each element needed to align precisely. The announcement of my CEO position, Jessica's quarterly review meeting, and the unraveling of their carefully constructed deception. One misstep could disrupt the entire sequence of events I had planned. Mark excused himself from the table again, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. Through the restaurant's windows, I watched him pace on the outdoor terrace, his gestures becoming increasingly agitated as he spoke. Jessica must be delivering her part of the performance perfectly, though she had no idea she was playing a role in my orchestration. The maitre d' approached our table, concern evident in his expression. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Anderson? Would you like me to have the kitchen hold your entrees until Mr. Anderson returns?" I waved away his concern with practiced ease. The picture of a patient wife understanding of her husband's work commitments. In reality, every moment Mark spent on that phone call was another thread in the tapestry of evidence I had woven. The restaurant's security cameras, installed at my quiet request through corporate connections, captured his every movement, every anxious gesture, every moment spent prioritizing his mistress over our anniversary dinner. James Cooper's. Final email arrived as I watched Mark through the window. "Rachel, the office is ready. Your new nameplate is on the door. Security passes updated. The morning announcement will change everything." He had no idea how right he was about that. Last part. The sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, a beautiful backdrop for the drama unfolding at our table. Mark returned, his collar slightly askew, a light sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cool evening air. His attempts at casual conversation felt forced, each word carefully chosen to maintain his crumbling facade. I directed the conversation toward work, watching him navigate the dangerous waters between truth and deception. "How is the merger preparation going?" I asked innocently, knowing that his response would add another layer to tomorrow's revelation. Each lie he told now would make the truth more devastating when it emerged. The waiter arrived with our main courses, the timing impeccable. Mark barely glanced at his plate, his attention constantly drawn back to his phone. I noted every detail. The way his hand shook slightly as he reached for his water glass, the subtle tells that indicated his mounting stress. Through the restaurant's ambient noise, I caught fragments of conversations from nearby tables. Couples celebrating special occasions, business associates closing deals, all unaware that they were witnesses to the carefully choreographed prelude to tomorrow's corporate earthquake. My own phone buzzed quietly. Another message from Lisa. Security footage from last week archived and backed up. Hotel receipts confirmed. Paper trail complete. I acknowledged her update with a subtle nod to myself, watching Mark's growing discomfort with calculated satisfaction. The city lights began to twinkle as dusk settled over Seattle, each one a star in the constellation of my revenge. Tomorrow, those same lights would illuminate a very different scene, one where the balance of power shifted dramatically, where carefully constructed lies crumbled under the weight of truth and corporate authority. Mark's phone buzzed again, and I watched him struggle with the decision to check it. The internal battle played across his features, the need to maintain appearances warring with his compulsion to respond to Jessica's messages. His weakness was becoming more apparent with each passing moment. I took another sip of wine, savoring both its complex notes and the knowledge of what awaited them tomorrow. The quarterly review meeting would be my first official act as CEO, and Jessica had no idea she would be presenting to the woman whose life she had helped unravel. The pieces were all in motion now, an intricate dance of timing and circumstance. Each message Mark sent, each moment he spent distracted by his phone, added another nail to the coffin of his deception. Tomorrow, the weight of consequences would come crashing down on both of them. As I watched him fumble through another excuse to check his phone, I felt an almost clinical detachment. The woman who had once loved him, who had built dreams alongside him, was gone. In her place sat someone stronger, someone who understood that power and justice sometimes wore the same face. The restaurant's soft lighting cast shadows across our table, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt increasingly artificial. Soon, the carefully maintained veneer of our marriage would shatter, taking with it the professional facades both Mark and Jessica had constructed. I could almost see tomorrow's scene playing out before me. Jessica walking into the conference room, confident in her position, only to find her world turning upside down. The moment she would realize that her lover's wife was now her direct superior would be worth every second of tonight's performance. The plan was in motion, unstoppable now. Like a row of dominoes beginning their fall, each element would trigger the next, creating a cascade of revelations that would leave their carefully constructed world in ruins. And I would watch it all unfold from the CEO's chair, my position of power secured just in time to make their downfall complete. The climactic moment arrived with devastating precision at our anniversary dinner. Mark's phone lit up one final time, and the color drained from his face as he read the message. His hands trembled as he set the device down, his eyes darting between me and the exit. Something had shifted in the carefully orchestrated dance of deception he'd been maintaining all evening. The ambient noise of the lookout seemed to fade away as tension crackled between us. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's skyline witnessed the unraveling of years of lies. The Space Needle stood like a silent sentinel, its lights piercing through the gathering storm clouds. "Rachel," Mark started, his voice carrying an unfamiliar edge of panic. "I need to tell you something." The weight of his words hung in the air between us, heavy with the anticipation of a confession. I had long anticipated, but I wasn't about to make this easy for him. I took a deliberate sip of wine, watching him over the rim of my glass. "Of course, darling. Does it have something to do with the rather urgent messages you've been receiving all evening?" My tone remained perfectly pleasant, masking the steel beneath. A crash from a nearby table made him jump. The waiter had dropped a glass, the sound shattering the tension momentarily. Mark used the interruption to loosen his tie, a gesture I'd seen countless times when he was about to deliver bad news to clients. "There's been a situation at work," he began, falling back on familiar corporate language. "Jessica, Ms. Palmer has made some accusations." He paused, searching my face for any reaction to the name. I gave him nothing. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Seattle's infamous rain began to tap against the windows. The weather seemed determined to provide the perfect backdrop for this moment of reckoning. I watched a droplet trace its way down the glass, taking its time just as I was taking mine. "Accusations?" I prompted, my voice carrying just the right note of wifely concern. "That sounds serious. Perhaps we should discuss this at home." The suggestion made him shift uncomfortably in his chair, no doubt weighing his options. The maitre d' approached our table, sensing the tension. Would Sir and Madam care for dessert? The timing was impeccable, adding another layer of discomfort to Mark's obvious distress. He waved the man away with an impatient gesture. "No, Rachel, this needs to be addressed now." Mark's voice had taken on an urgent quality. "Jessica claims she's saying that." He struggled with the words, each attempt at explanation dying before it could fully form. I leaned forward slightly, allowing concern to show in my expression. "What exactly is Ms. Palmer saying? Mark?" The use of her formal title made him flinch. Another tell, another crack in his facade. His phone buzzed again, but this time he didn't reach for it. Instead, he ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times during our marriage. She's threatening to go to HR. She says she has evidence of inappropriate behavior. The irony of his statement almost made me smile. Evidence of inappropriate behavior indeed. If he only knew about the carefully compiled dossier sitting in my new office, waiting for tomorrow's revelation. Evidence? I kept my voice steady, interested but not overly concerned. That sounds rather serious, especially given her position in the company. I watched the implication of my words sink in, saw the moment he realized the professional ramifications of what he was about to confess. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the Seattle skyline in stark relief. In that brief moment of brilliant light, I caught Mark's reflection in the window, a man watching his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. "Rachel, I need you to understand," he began again, desperation creeping into his voice. "Things aren't always what they seem. Sometimes situations develop that we don't intend." I cut him off with a raised hand. "Mark, before you continue, I think there's something you should know." I reached for my purse, retrieving my phone with deliberate slowness. "I received an interesting email today." His eyes fixed on my phone with growing apprehension. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows like an impatient audience waiting for the final act. I took my time unlocking the screen, enjoying the way uncertainty played across his features. "It's fascinating, really," I continued, scrolling through my emails with casual interest. "How the corporate world can shift so quickly. One day you're in one position and the next?" I let the sentence hang, watching him process the subtle threat in my words. Mark's hand crept toward his own phone, but he stopped himself. The messages from Jessica could wait. Right now, his attention was completely focused on me, perhaps for the first time in months. "What email?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Outside, another flash of lightning illuminated the city, closer this time. The storm was moving in, just as my moment of revelation approached. I placed my phone on the table between us, screen dark but full of promise. "Tell me, Mark, how well do you know the corporate structure at Horizon Tech? Have you been keeping up with the latest organizational changes?" His confusion was evident, the sudden shift in conversation throwing him off balance. "What does that have to do with anything?" The edge of panic in his voice had sharpened, cutting through his usual composed demeanor. I smiled, the expression carrying none of the warmth it once held for him. "Everything, darling. It has everything to do with what's about to happen next." The aftermath exploded across the lookout like a carefully orchestrated symphony of chaos. Mark's phone wouldn't stop buzzing, a constant stream of increasingly frantic messages from Jessica. The rain intensified against the windows, nature's own accompaniment to the unfolding drama. "What exactly are you saying, Rachel?" Mark's voice cracked slightly, his usual confidence wavering as he stared at my phone still lying face down between us. The ambient lighting caught the sheen of sweat on his forehead, highlighting every micro-expression of growing panic. I took another sip of wine, savoring the moment. Through the wall of windows, lightning illuminated the Horizon Tech building in the distance. Even from here, I could see my office, soon to be my former office, where tomorrow everything would change. The maitre d' approached again, concern evident in his professional demeanor. "Mrs. Anderson, is everything all right? Should I have the kitchen delay your dessert course?" His presence provided the perfect pause in our conversation, a moment to let the tension build further. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying just the right note of authority, "I think we'll need that bottle of Dom Perignon I requested earlier. It seems we have something to celebrate." The maitre d' nodded and retreated, leaving Mark to stew in his confusion. Mark's phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. He glanced at it reflexively, but didn't dare reach for it. The screen lit up with Jessica's name, visible even from my side of the table. How fitting that she would be digitally present for this moment. It's interesting, I continued, tracing the rim of my wine glass. How people can work so closely, together yet know so little about what's really happening. Take Horizon Tech, for example. So many changes in the works that haven't been announced yet. Thunder rolled overhead as Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Rachel, whatever you're trying to say, I'm not trying to say anything, Mark. I'm about to be very clear. I leaned forward slightly, maintaining perfect composure. Tomorrow morning, the board is announcing some significant changes in leadership. James Cooper is stepping down as CEO. The color drained from Mark's face as understanding began to dawn. Outside, another flash of lightning illuminated the Seattle skyline, the storm moving closer, mirroring the approaching revelation. The timing is quite perfect, really, I continued, watching his expression carefully. The announcement coincides with the quarterly review meetings. I believe Jessica has quite an important presentation prepared. She's been working on it for weeks, hasn't she? Mark's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass. How did you know about her presentation? I make it my business to know everything that happens in my company, Mark. Well, soon to be my company. I allowed myself a small smile as comprehension finally registered on his face. The maitre d' returned with the champagne, the pop of the cork punctuating the moment perfectly. Mark barely noticed as the golden liquid was poured into fresh flutes. His world was collapsing in on itself, one revelation at a time. You're not saying, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. The board's decision was unanimous, I confirmed, raising my champagne flute. James personally recommended me as his successor. Effective tomorrow morning, I'll be the new CEO of Horizon Tech Solutions. Mark's phone buzzed again, but he seemed frozen, unable to move. Through the windows, the storm had reached its peak, rain lashing against the glass as if demanding entry to witness this moment. So you see, I continued, my voice carrying easily over the sound of the storm. Jessica's threats to go to HR are particularly interesting. I wonder how she'll feel presenting her quarterly review to her new CEO, her lover's wife. The champagne in Mark's glass trembled as his hand shook. Rachel, let me explain. Oh, there's nothing to explain, I cut him off smoothly. Everything is already documented. Every email, every hotel receipt, every late-night project meeting. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't investigate when things didn't add up? Lightning flashed again, casting harsh shadows across Mark's face as he struggled to process what was happening. All his careful plans, all his deceptions were crumbling under the weight of a truth he never saw coming. The board announcement is scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, I continued, checking my watch with deliberate casualness. Jessica's review meeting is at 9:30. Perfect timing, don't you think? Just enough time for the news to spread through the office. Mark's phone lit up again, but this time with a different name, James Cooper. The pieces were falling into place faster than he could process them. James knew? He managed to ask. James knows everything he needs to know, I replied cryptically. He's been quite supportive of my career advancement, unlike some people at the table. The storm outside reached a crescendo, rain drumming against the windows with increasing intensity. Each drop seemed to echo the rhythm of destruction as Mark's carefully constructed world fell apart. You can't do this, he whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. He already knew it was too late. I smiled, raising my champagne glass and a mock toast. I'm not doing anything, Mark. You and Jessica did this to yourselves. I'm simply taking my rightful place at the company. The fact that it coincides with exposing your affair is just fortunate timing. The maitre d' appeared again, this time with our dessert course, a dark chocolate torte that suddenly seemed like the perfect metaphor for this bittersweet moment. Mark stared at the plate placed before him as if it might hold some escape from this situation. Tomorrow morning. I continued, my voice carrying just enough edge to cut through his daze. Everything changes. Not just for you and Jessica, but for everyone at Horizon Tech. I suggest you use tonight to think very carefully about your next move. Thunder rolled overhead one final time, nature's applause for the performance unfolding in the lookout. Mark's world had shattered, and I had orchestrated every moment of its destruction. A profound silence settled over our table as I watched Mark struggle with the weight of revelation. The chocolate torte sat untouched between us, its rich aroma mixing with the petrichor drifting in from the storm outside. Each flash of lightning through the lookout's windows illuminated a different emotion crossing his face. Denial, anger, fear, and finally, devastating comprehension. My wine glass caught the amber light from the overhead chandelier as I lifted it, studying the deep red liquid within. 5 years of marriage reflected in its depths, each memory now tainted by the knowledge of his betrayal. Yet sitting here, watching him crumble, I felt nothing but a strange sense of peace. Mark's hand moved toward his phone again, but he stopped himself. Jessica's messages continued to light up the screen, each one more urgent than the last. They'd played their game so carefully, thinking themselves clever with their coded communications and discreet meetings. How quickly it had all fallen apart. You have to understand. Mark finally broke the silence, his voice carrying an edge of desperation I'd never heard before. It wasn't meant to be like this. Jessica and I... It just happened. I set my glass down with deliberate precision, the soft clink against the tablecloth cutting through his excuses. Nothing just happens, Mark. You made choices. Every lunch, meeting, every late-night email, every lie about working late, those were all choices. Through the windows, Seattle's lights sparkled despite the rain, each one a witness to this moment of reckoning. The Space Needle stood illuminated against the dark sky, a beacon marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. "What do you want?" he asked, his corporate negotiation instincts finally kicking in. "We can work something out. Figure this out together." His eyes darted around the restaurant, looking for an escape that didn't exist. I allowed myself a small smile, one that didn't reach my eyes. "What I want is to enjoy the rest of my anniversary dinner. Tomorrow will take care of itself." The waiter approached with fresh coffee, the rich aroma providing a momentary distraction from the tension. Mark's hands shook slightly as he reached for his cup, the liquid rippling with his unsteady grip. "You've changed," he observed, studying me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. The woman he'd married, the one he thought he could deceive indefinitely, had transformed into someone he no longer recognized. "People tend to do that," I replied, stirring a single sugar into my coffee. "We evolve, adapt, grow stronger. Some of us just do it more quietly than others." His phone buzzed again, and this time he did pick it up, reading Jessica's latest message with growing alarm. The color drained from his face as he looked back at me. "She's threatening to expose everything." "How interesting," I mused, taking a small bite of the torte. "It seems Ms. Palmer doesn't handle pressure well. Not a great quality in an executive. Wouldn't you agree?" Thunder rolled in the distance as Mark struggled to find words. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, moving east over the mountains. Inside, however, the atmosphere remained charged with unspoken accusations and shattered trust. "Did James know?" Mark asked suddenly. "About us? About Jessica?" I took my time answering, savoring both the chocolate and his discomfort. "James knows what a CEO needs to know about their company, including which employees might pose liability issues." The implications of my words hung in the air between us. Mark's career in corporate marketing had taught him enough about damage control to understand exactly what I was suggesting. "You can't just destroy people's lives," he protested weakly, but the fight was already draining from his voice. "Destroy?" I raised an eyebrow. I'm simply taking my place as CEO. Everything else, the lies, the affair, the potential HR violations, that's all on you and Jessica. I'm just ensuring the company's interests are protected. A couple at a nearby table laughed, the sound jarring against our intense conversation. Mark flinched slightly, suddenly aware of our public setting. The realization that we were having this discussion in one of Seattle's most prestigious restaurants seemed to hit him all at once. All those late nights at the office, he said slowly. The networking events, the extra projects. You weren't just working on your career, were you? You were building toward this. I was doing exactly what I said I was doing, advancing my career. The fact that it coincides with uncovering your indiscretions is just fortuitous timing. The storm had moved far enough away that the city lights were visible again, each one reflecting off the rain-slicked windows. In the distance, the Horizon Tech building stood dark except for security lighting. Tomorrow, it would be illuminated by a very different kind of electricity. Mark's phone had finally gone silent, the stream of messages from Jessica apparently exhausted. The quiet felt heavy with possibility and consequence, like the air before a lightning strike. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I dabbed my lips with my napkin, taking my time before responding. "Now we finish our anniversary dinner. Tomorrow I step into my new role as CEO. And you, well, you have some decisions to make about your future, both personal and professional." The weight of understanding settled over him like a heavy cloak. Every carefully constructed lie, every secret meeting, every manipulated situation had led to this moment, and there was nothing he could do to change its outcome. The storm clouds parted over Seattle, revealing a sky dotted with stars that seemed to witness this final act. Mark sat across from me at the lookout, a broken man coming to terms with the ruins of his carefully constructed deception. His phone lay silent now, Jessica's frantic messages having finally ceased. "You know what the hardest part was?" I mused, studying the last drops of wine in my glass. "Not discovering the affair, not finding the messages, the receipts, or the carefully coded calendar entries. It was realizing how little you thought of me, how completely you underestimated what I was capable of." Through the windows, the city had taken on an almost ethereal glow after the rain. Each light reflected off wet surfaces, creating a dazzling display that seemed to mock the darkness settling over our table. "When did you know?" Mark asked, his voice hollow. "How long have you been planning this?" I set my glass down, considering his question. The planning started the moment I found that first email. But the groundwork? That was laid years ago, with every meeting I took, every connection I made, every project I championed. While you were busy orchestrating your affair, I was building something far more substantial. The chocolate torte sat half-eaten between us, its rich darkness a fitting metaphor for the bittersweet triumph of this moment. In the distance, the Horizon Tech building stood as a silent testament to tomorrow's inevitable changes. "Jessica," Mark started, then stopped, seeming to realize the futility of whatever he had been about to say. His hand moved instinctively toward his phone, but he pulled it back, finally understanding that some messages were better left unsent. "Ms. Palmer will have her opportunity to present her quarterly review tomorrow," I reminded him. "Though I suspect her focus might be somewhat compromised, given the circumstances." The maître d' approached one final time, perhaps sensing that our anniversary dinner was drawing to its natural conclusion. "Will there be anything else this evening?" I smiled, reaching for my clutch. "No, thank you. I believe we've concluded our celebration." The word celebration carried a weight that made Mark flinch. As I stood smoothing my dress, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the trusting wife who had once believed in the power of love and partnership. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that true power came from within. "Rachel," Mark called out as I turned to leave. "What would it take to fix this?" I paused, looking back at him. The restaurant's warm lighting couldn't disguise the desperation in his eyes. "Fix this? There's nothing to fix, Mark. Tomorrow, I become CEO of Horizon Tech. Everything else, your relationship with Jessica, your career, our marriage, that's already broken beyond repair." The night air carried the fresh scent of rain as I stepped outside. Seattle spread out before me, a landscape of possibility and promise. Behind me, through the lookout's windows, I could see Mark still sitting at our table, staring at his phone, as if it might offer some escape from the reality he now faced. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: the board announcement, Jessica's review meeting, the inevitable fallout from today's revelations. But tonight, walking away from the far ruins of my marriage and toward the future I had crafted, I felt nothing but an overwhelming sense of liberation. The valet brought my car around, its sleek surface still wet from the recent rain. As I slid behind the wheel, I caught one final glimpse of the lookout in my rearview mirror. The restaurant had been the setting for so many moments in my life: first dates, celebrations, and now, this final scene of retribution. Starting the engine, I pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the last vestiges of the woman I used to be. The city lights guided my way home, each one a beacon illuminating the path to my new beginning. Tomorrow would dawn bright and clear, bringing with it the sweet taste of victory and the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they never thought you could be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.